My name is James Windsor. I'm the Business Development Manager for AWS Managed Services, which, in fact, not a lot of people know about it yet, even though it's been around for a while. And I just realized that my title probably didn't give too much away, so I probably should work on my titling skills. But what I'm going to talk about today is how you can accelerate your journey to the cloud with AMS, but it's not just about getting to the cloud. Really, what we're trying to do is to help customers focus on innovation a lot sooner. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we can do that and also how some customers are already using it to do that. But before we jump into the context, I just wanted to tell you what AMS was up front because it's sort of a new topic for a lot of people. So essentially, we are infrastructure operations in the cloud. So we will operate your AWS environment for you. Now, we're not like a traditional managed service provider. It's a little bit different because it's, we start with a secure, compliant landing zone that we build for you, and we put the operating model in place up front. Now, you might be familiar with the traditional mode of operations on-premise is usually people-heavy. So you hire a bunch of people with skills and they operate the environment. We take an automation-first approach, and to illustrate that, we're running today at over 90% automation. So if you can imagine, when you think about managed services, you usually think about people doing stuff. In the AMS world, people are usually not involved in a lot of the things that go on. And we are backed, though, by a fairly large operations team that sits in 5 locations around the world. And because we're so heavily focused on automation, in some accounts, we're running at, say, 93% automation. It means that the experts that we've put in place can focus on building additional automation for customers, but more importantly, they can focus on customer issues. So if there's a P1 incident or a P2 incident, that's when those 24/7 folks get engaged, and they really band together, get on the bridge with the customer, with the application owner, and help to resolve infrastructure problems because they're not burdened by having to do a lot of the mundane tasks traditionally associated with infrastructure operations. In addition to that, we name for each account what we call a cloud service delivery manager. And what they do is they're kind of a primary contact for each customer. But what they also do is when they give you the monthly report every month, similar to if you're familiar with enterprise support and the technical account managers, every month they're going to give you a report and help you to optimize for cost. And that might be counterintuitive for a managed services provider because traditionally managed service providers would try to lock you into longer term agreements. What we really want to do is to get your cost as low as possible so that you can spend more of your money on innovation because we're confident that a lot of that innovation will happen within AWS, and we want to get you focused on the fun stuff. We also don't lock you in, so it is a month-to-month service. It's very typical of an Amazon service in that it's pay as you go, and you can get out whenever you want. In fact, we can help customers get off the service if they decide they want to manage on their own in the future. So on that note, like some customers will actually look at us as training wheels. So we do have some customers who've said to us, I want to build my own operating capability, and there's going to be a really good session later on today on building operational capability in the cloud, but I'm not ready yet. I don't have the people. I haven't built the processes yet. And they use us not just to fill that gap in the interim, but also to learn from what best practice looks like operating in the cloud because we're very transparent about how we do it. Now, getting into more of the context, the problem statement really is that almost everybody says they're cloud first. However, most enterprise workloads are still running on-premise. We went out when we started to build AWS Managed Services and asked a bunch of enterprise leaders around the world not just what they wanted, but what challenges they were having, what did they need, but also what they didn't like about traditional managed services. And we got a pretty consistent response. Everybody wants to move faster. The number one thing holding people back is the skills gap. They don't have the skills in-house to do this. And what people were finding, customers 4 years ago that were coming to us saying, hey, I want to move at speed, I want to move at scale, but I don't have the skills in-house to do it. A lot of their incumbent partners were really unable to help them because they hadn't yet built that capability when cloud was sort of newish. And there weren't many partners in the market at that time, so we started to build it based on customer demand. And when we asked customers what they didn't like about traditional managed services, their response was also pretty consistent. They basically said they didn't like the lack of transparency, they didn't like the high cost, and didn't like getting locked into long-term, rigid contracts. So in terms of how IT is changing and the way we address that, we've been saying for years that IT needs to become a partner to the business, but I think now more than ever, the business is leaning into IT and saying, hey, I need you to be more agile. I need you to enable me to be able to launch products more quickly, to enter new markets more quickly, to respond to the market. I need you to help me get more out of the data we have and to collect better data so that we can ask intelligent questions and solve for them. We need to build better products. We need to do this within the budgets we already have, so we need to drive cost out somewhere. And the way we look at it is, in an enterprise application estate, probably about 15 to 20%, and I'm not talking about Spotify or Uber, I'm talking about your traditional enterprises, probably about 15 to 20% of their applications are really meaningful in terms of their ability to drive business value if you optimize them for cloud and are able to iterate on those systems quickly to release new features. And then about 80% of your estate, you need to run your business, but it doesn't really move the needle for your end customer. It doesn't differentiate you in any way. And I call those more operational workloads. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, in a minute, about how we help you with both of those types of workloads to get where you want to go. But before I say that, I just want to touch on why is transformation the goal as a starting point? And the reason why is that for those 20% of your applications, if you can move fast, if you can find new ways to develop and architect applications and new ways to operate, so say, a lot of folks refer to it DevOps, even though it means different things to different people. We found that compared to low-performing companies who haven't invested heavily in those areas, the ones who have adopted those new ways of operating and of developing applications are much more quick to release new features, and they're able to respond to signals in the market a lot more quickly, which makes them a lot more competitive and helps them to stay relevant. And so, we can help you with both pathways. So, on one hand, you take that 15 to 20% and you're driving continuous improvement. You're rewriting those applications to be more elastic, to maybe incorporate some of the new services that AWS is bringing out. These are highly decoupled applications based on microservices typically. They are going to be applications with a very high rate of change. And often the people who build those are going to want to operate those on their own. So you start to get comfortable with this idea of multiple operating models and multiple landing zones. So that goes into one landing zone and one operating model. And then we would propose that for your traditional applications, we can do some minimum viable refactoring for those to get them into the cloud and really help you to quickly, one, drive cost out, but also to free up some of your resources to go and focus on more of this interesting stuff. But what the reality has been for most customers is that when they start their cloud journey, they typically start with a project. So they want to move an application or create an application. They then build a landing zone. They maybe do a migration, and then they have to operate. And what we found is that they build this cloud center of excellence often, and then that team, as they start to migrate at scale, it breaks down because now they're supposed to be focused on migration and optimizing workloads, and now they're burdened with having to patch operating systems and having to make configuration changes and give people temporary access through bastions and things like that. And what ends up happening is they stall. They stop migrating because they just don't have the bandwidth to do all the things that they need to do. And the way to get around this is to automate. So to recap on the challenges, to do all of the things that I just said we believe are important if you want to get to innovation more quickly, the challenges you're going to hit is that cloud talent is very difficult to come by, and it quickly disappears if you don't give them interesting work to do. So if you are hiring people who are highly skilled and asking them to manage legacy workloads in the cloud, many of them are not going to want to do that. It's not very interesting work, and it's not differentiating to your business. the approach of labor arbitrage versus automation just doesn't work. If you look at, we have customers that are running, say, 120 applications on AMS. That would generate about 5,000 change requests a month. If you're not executing those change requests with automation, you will just simply not be able to keep up. And what they're finding is that that volume of change, what ends up happening is a lot of it just doesn't get done, or a lot of it doesn't get tracked, and it gets lost by the wayside. By doing it with automation, everything is tracked and logged, and it all gets done within the month, which means that your operating systems are always patched. Your systems are always backed up. You're always hitting your SLAs. So the application owners are getting a good experience out of the infrastructure operations piece. And you're not burdened with that heavyweight contract that says, well, here's the scope today, and even if you change your business over the next, say, 2 years, you're locked into that scope. So if you want to change, then we've got to change the contract, we're going to charge you more money, we want you to extend. We don't do that. What we do is we get you into a state where you're very well operated, you can see what we're doing, and then if you decide that you want to make a change, it's very easy for you to extract yourself from it because it's a month-to-month service. So we took all of those things into consideration about what we actually believe customers are trying to get out of moving to the cloud and what the challenges were, and we listened to what customers asked us to go and do, and we went and we built it. And what it looks like from traditional operations lens is all of the standard ITIL-aligned tasks that you would typically do on-premise. So if a dev wants to provision an infrastructure stack to go deploy their application, they would submit a change request to AMS, and automation would go and build that stack based on a pre-baked pattern that we would help them build. There's security and compliance built into the service itself. So you don't have to worry about the fact that you're coming from an on-premise environment where you've had decades to perfect your security posture. We've baked the security into the service itself so that you can really just go and focus on the application. The systems are monitored 24/7, and we respond to the alerts. We provide you, as I said, with not just cost optimization, but also optimization around performance so that you get the most out of the platform itself. As I said, we've automated the patching and the backup. Everything is driven through change management. Our people are focused heavily on incident management and resolution. And then finally, in terms of service integration, we also integrate with your existing processes, like your change process, and even to some extent, your existing operational processes. And so what that allows you to do, because you don't have to build any of that, it means that instead of you pausing and going and spending maybe a year or 18 months building out that team, I'll give you some customer examples in a minute, it means that you can start right now. So you can actually come to us and we can build a landing zone for you, and you can start moving workloads in. Within a matter of weeks, you could be running workloads in the cloud and not having to worry about building out the operational piece. We are typically going to be about 50% or better of the cost that it would take a typical customer to run at the same level of efficiency with the same metrics that we would put in place. And the service itself, I'll go through some of the compliance later, but it comes, for example, pre-baked with PCI compliance, SOC 123, ISO, HIPAA, NIST, and some others. That allows you to then focus on innovation. It empowers your team to kind of, because they don't have to work on operations, they can really focus on learning on the job about how to operate the new way in the cloud at the application level, which is a lot more interesting for them. And they get to leverage best practices out of the box, so they don't have to go and just read about best practice or learn about best practice and try to implement it. They just get to enjoy it. So the way that would look in terms of shared responsibility is now, instead of going up to the hypervisor, we actually take over everything up to and including the patched OS. And the customer and their partners still focus on managing at the application layer or any databases that they might have that don't use, for example, our fully managed database services. Now, what you get on the journey is that it's an API-driven service, so you can integrate this with your existing ITSM tool, or you can integrate it with CI/CD pipeline tooling. You get access to our dedicated AWS staff that provides you with 24/7 follow-the-sun coverage. We have these compliance certifications that I referred to a little bit earlier. And we do the onboarding. We put the operations integration in place up front so that when you move something to production, there's no ambiguity about how it should be operated. There's no one saying, oh, this application is down, who do I call? All of those things are in place. We have run books in place, processes in place, automation in place, so that when something does go down at 3 o'clock in the morning, the team is able to react to that in an appropriate way from day one without having to solve for how to do that on the fly. We don't do the migrations. The AMS team is not an SI. We don't do migrations or integration. We work with an SI to do that work. They will do the migration and the deployment and some of that integration work for you. And then we operate, as I said, in a highly automated, highly standardized way so that you don't have to think about infrastructure for that portion of your environment. Now, we've also developed, a lot of our customers are using ServiceNow as an ITSM tool. So we've developed a connector app, and that allows you to submit and track all of your existing change requests directly from ServiceNow. Because the service is API-based, we have our own set of APIs, it's actually designed to be integrated with your tools. So we expect that most enterprise customers will do deeper integration, say, for example, to update the CMDB, et cetera, so that they get the full AMS experience. But that would be up to the customer to work out with partners in ProServe. It's something that we would support as a team, but every customer is going to be a little bit different in that respect. Now, who is using AMS? This is a sample of the types of customers that are using it today. The best example in Australia is National Australia Bank. So for those of you who maybe attended Summit this year or who might have been at reInvent last year, National Australia Bank did get on stage and talk a little bit about how AMS has enabled their journey, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on that in a moment when I go through some specific examples. Scotia Gas Networks is a highly regulated gas pipeline provider in the UK, so they manage a lot of the UK's gas pipelines. They are audited by the federal government in the UK, and what they realized that in order for them to grow, you can't really grow a pipeline business. You have to start expanding into other areas of business. And they realized that for them to grow their business, they had to get into non-core things that they weren't doing, that weren't maybe related to pipelines, but that weren't running pipelines. And to do that, they needed to develop new software and new products. And they did not want to spend 2 years trying to figure out infrastructure. And so they leaned on us. They were one of our first customers to really get into the cloud quickly and then be able to focus all of their efforts and their budget on innovation. Information Builders is a US-based ISV. What they wanted to do was be able to offer cloud-based software to their customers. They had traditionally been running in managed hosting environments. Within 4 months of engaging with us, they were able to launch their first 10 customers on a new cloud product, and they won a People's Choice Award for Best New Cloud Product in the US based on being able to launch on AMS and not having to manage those environments. Origin was a little bit different. Origin essentially came to us and said that they just wanted to show that they could move a little bit faster. And we don't manage all of their environments, but what many enterprise customers will do is they'll set up a set of guidelines that say if a workload looks like this, it goes to AMS. And if a workload looks like that, it'll go to say, for example, the DevOps team. And so this is the approach that they're taking. The other thing they're doing, which I think is probably going to be a lot more common in the coming years, is they're facing head-on the challenge of technical debt and retiring a lot of their old application suite. General Electric, they were an early adopter of cloud. They went all in with cloud very early on. They're using us for a very specific use case. They wanted to launch a business in Japan, and they're using AMS to help them launch that business because they don't have any operational capability on the ground there. So those are a couple of short examples, and now I'll go a little bit deeper into some customer stories. Now, the first one is, I wanted to pick a public sector example. We don't have many public sector examples yet because the service itself has only been GA for less than 2 years, and the sales cycle is about 12 months. We had a customer who had a very progressive CIO. They had to drive cost out. They needed everything to be PCI compliant as they deployed their applications to the cloud, and they wanted to act as a broker to other departments. They're a state and local government customer. They were able to use AMS to very quickly get launched, and it's kind of seen as like on-the-job training for their employees to kind of witness how to operate well in the cloud. And it frees them up to really focus on how to do their higher order application-associated work with a little more breathing space. So we gave them that landing zone that's PCI compliant, and they're now looking at how to move all of their workloads to the cloud. National Australia Bank, they actually had a cloud center of excellence. They had a DevOps team, but they had been outsourced for a long time to traditional service providers on premise. And what they said was they had been working in the cloud for about 2 years. They didn't have very much to show for it. And so what they really wanted to do was demonstrate internally that they could move faster. And we've got a few customers like this who have come and said, it's not really a technical challenge, it's more of a people process challenge, a cultural challenge to demonstrate that you actually can move at scale and at pace, that it is secure to operate in the cloud and that you can do it well. And by moving a large number of applications really quickly, they did 30 applications in 50 days. We've seen some customers do 50 in 50 days. What it does is it uncovers a lot of that inertia and allows for you to solve for it in flight. And this is what they did. And once their teams were able to see the benefit of the high level of automation, as I said, like they would generate, say, 5,000 change requests a month, and we would process 93% of those with automation. When they see the 100% patch and backup compliance, the SLA compliance, they really understand where the value is with AMS, and as a result, they're much more highly motivated as application owners to get their applications into that operating environment. And they're probably sitting at about 120 workloads today, and they're continuing to find new applications to move into the AMS landing zone. You can see some of the quotes. I mean, the really key thing about it was they were able to get up and running with essentially no operational capability in-house. And when I spoke to their DevOps team, one of the questions I got was, well, we already have a DevOps team. We actually already do have some people that understand how to operate cloud workloads. The question I put to them was, okay, well, if I were to give you, say, 400 Windows 2012 servers and ask you to operate those, would you want to do that? And the answer is no. Because the DevOps team, even though they do ops, it's a very different proposition than actually building an operations team that is more traditionally aligned. And that is really when it clicked for NAB, that's the problem that we solve for. And that's how we help them to move a lot faster, because the reality for them was that the majority of their applications actually fit that other mode. Now, the last example that I'm going to give you is a customer in the UK. They are the largest non-life insurer in the UK. And what they found was that their customers were asking for new features. They wanted to be able to do price comparisons. Their primary core insurance platform was a mainframe-based solution. And what they wanted to do, they made a sort of snap decision that, hey, we've got to get this into the cloud. And what they challenged us with is they came to AWS and they also went to their partners and said, we actually want to get the cloud version of this software up and running in about 4 to 5 weeks so that we can get started with actually building applications. Most of the partners said, we don't think that's a realistic timeline. But for us at AMS, it's actually quite simple for us to get those environments up and running because it's all templated. So we built their landing zone in less than 2 weeks, and they were able to deploy the application. And within 5 weeks, they were starting to use it. Within a couple of months of working with us, they had already deployed their first compliant application, which was that price comparison tool that's on the web. And now they're continuing to iterate on that and build more and more features out. So again, it's an example of how a customer made a snap decision of, I want to move to new ways of working, but I don't know how to do it. And they're able to take AMS and use that as a lever to very quickly get it up and running. And you can imagine the effect that that has on the people within the insurance business to say, wow, we actually can do things in a different way, and we can do it really quickly. It's not as hard as maybe we thought it was. And so I think it's a great example, and we're really excited about continuing to work with them on getting the rest of their core insurance platform over into AWS. Now, if you're interested in AMS and what AMS can do for you, if you're maybe at the beginning of your cloud journey or even partway through your cloud journey and you're struggling to scale and you'd like to know more, there are a couple things that we can do. The next step typically we go with is customers, once they understand the value proposition and they feel like it's something that they can help them, is we'll actually come in for, say, 90 minutes or 2 hours with our technical team and get all your folks in a room. And as I said, we're very transparent about how we operate, so we'll actually dive into not just what we do and what the outcomes are, but dive into how we do patching, how we can ingest CloudFormation templates, how we operate your environment, what it will actually look for you, what onboarding would look like, and even get some of your application owners to talk through what your workloads look like and what you're trying to get out of moving to the cloud and how you would prioritize a migration, what type of refactoring you might have to do to get something to fit. So we can do that type of overview. We can do a technical deep dive where we do like half-day workshops with customers to really dive into the full extent of their on-premise estate and what it looks like and what needs to move first. And then we also have a lot of training available. So we have face-to-face training that's available that we run. We've run a couple sessions in Sydney this year. We also have a lot of online training that's available for both partners and for customers if you want to know more about AMS. Or alternatively, you can also just you can get in touch with me if you just want to set up a phone conversation. My email address is here. You can copy that down. I will also be available over in the expo area, so you can track me down over there if you want to have a face-to-face conversation. And yeah, really, in addition to figuring out how I can help you, I'm always interested to hear, the challenges that you're facing and what you're trying to get out of moving to the cloud. I find it really interesting. So please seek me out and have a conversation with me. And also, please do not forget to fill out the session survey. And I thank you very much for coming.